Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bricks and Dragons. Today we are looking at our first ugly. This is the Thai Y ugly, and whoever had done this as a model, that it looks wonderful. Um, really, when you look at the uglies, there is really um, not much of a write up whatsoever when you look around on the web or whatever else. Um, really, these are cobbled together ships, primarily used by pirates. Um, or anyone else that is just down under luck or whatever else. I know that in the Star Wars gaming forums and stuff like that, typically when you want to just give someone a ship or something like that to start off with, you might throw them an ugly and say, "Here you are, good luck." So here we are with our first one. We have the Tai Y ugly. Um, it's a general alignment, Rise of the Empire, because we're using the TIE fighter as the basis of our cockpit. There again, um, you're talking about a non-pressurized cockpit, which is pretty standard for most of your TIE fighters. That's why they have to wear the special suits that they do, because there is no atmosphere in them. Um, that is one of the drawbacks to being a TIE fighter pilot. There is no atmosphere, so when it breaks apart, you're shooting out. Now, the Rebel Alliance, with a lot of their ships, part of the cockpit itself becomes its little lifeboat. So when you eject, you actually eject out the cockpit a little bit. Um, and that's why when you look at the Rebel Alliance and that, they don't have that full helmet with the oxygen and everything else. There is that difference here. So if you're using this, and I know that when you watch like Rebels, they're out in space and they're not wearing all that because it's a cartoon, and I don't think anyone ever really brought that up a lot later on. Um, it's just one of those things of early on when we're talking about these fighters and the differences. Your Tie Fighter was meant to be a mass-produced, just a generic ship, fairly cheap or whatever else. So. Um, if your pilot's inside of a suit that has all their life support and everything else, that just saves up on the ship, and it makes it a more simplistic design for them to mass produce and then get out into the field. Less problems with trying to make sure everything works correctly. That's really the original design. George Lucas himself had talked about the differences between the Rebel Alliance and the Galactic Empire. As the Galactic Empire had someone else manufacture the ships or whatever, where the Rebel Alliance, they may manufacture some of their own ships, but the people themselves are probably going to be sitting there monkeying with it, trying to make it go faster, shoot a little harder, whatever. Um, so here we have an ugly, grabbing the engines off of a Y wing, which actually for the light frame of a Y wing or of a Tie fighter, sorry, is actually very beneficial in those regards. So, um, being a patchwork starfighter here, we are at 12 meters long. It does only have a crew of one, has a cargo capacity of 65 kilograms. Typically, for us Americans that are using pounds, and I think there's only one other country in the world that is still using pounds, and I don't remember what it is offhand. Um, we're looking at about like 130-ish pounds or so. Consumables, we do have 2 days. Probably a very uncomfortable 2 days, but 2 days. Maneuverability is pretty good at 2D. Space, this thing is flying by pretty well at um, a 13. So really, it does better in space than it does here or in an atmosphere. In an atmosphere, because it has the lack of wings and everything else, that would normally help keep it up. It is only doing about 850 kilometers in an atmosphere. Has a hull of 2D, so it's a pretty decent, just an average hull. The sensors, which really on the nose cones that are painted here, those are actually your sensors from the Y Wing. So when you look at a Y wing, those are the sensors. The problem that the Y wing had always had was the engines made the sensors kind of vibrate a little bit. So the sensors were never the best in the Galaxy there, but they are pretty respectable. We can go 2 kilometers out at a 0D, so you can get a little sense. It doesn't really help. You can see out that far in your sensor packet, but it's not going to be very good. A scan at 4 kilometers, a search at 6 kilometers, and a focus at 300 meters. So we do have two laser cannons here, and they are fire linked, same chin cannons that you're going to get off of a TIE fighter. So you do have a fire control of 2D and a damage of 5D. Um, so for a very basic fighter, just to get things going, you're going to be fine. It's not going to be an intergalactic fighter. There is no hyperdrive on here. There's no shields on here. So you will have to kind of be careful as to where you're going. Not really the best type of ship to be going into a asteroid belt or anything else. Um, Much like your standard TIE fighter. Um, Without having the shields to do two things. Initially, we never talked, or it was never really talked about, and I think I mentioned this on one of the earlier videos. Um, when George Lucas had looked at shields, because in a lot of the science fiction, you just say shields, it just absorbs some of the damage. Um, with what Star Trek had done, when you start talking about your deflector dish, and it actually pushes away some of that space debris. Um, Things had kind of changed in the game later on, where they actually talk about if you have a shield of 2D, the first D of that would actually be a deflector dish to actually kind of push some of that space debris from hitting the hull of the ship. Um, and then anything else would be just pure shield. Now, when you're doing an active combat or whatever, I just always just assume it's doing the work of the shield and trying to keep you safe inside your ship. Um, but it is interesting that as things progress, because they fed off of each other, George Lucas and Gene Roddenberry fed off of each other's creations, and they were friends. Now I don't know how often they talked to each other or anything else, but they were friends with each other. So it is interesting, two very creative minds to come up with the big cornerstones of what we have for science fiction. Two of the biggest franchises out there. Um, so for them to become friends and talk things through and then borrow from each other and slip something in from one to the other into their own properties and all that, just as a nod to each other, and that was always a wonderful thought. So when we look at this, um, this is a bare bones fighter. Yeah, you're going to have to worry about it. Yesterday we had on the Soros Sub 3000. This could very easily overtake a Soros Sub 3000 and probably capture it as a prize because most of the time they're unarmed. Here you have an ugly that could, be used as a pirate vessel to subdue other craft. Obviously, it's got the speed and maneuverability to fly circles around it, catch up to it. The only thing is if the Soros Sub was able to get to uh, into hyperspace, this isn't going to be able to follow. So that's the only hope a prize vessel would have against something like this. Um, but there again, now this is a bare bones version of it. If you have someone that did upgrade this to add in a hyperdrive or something else, maybe you have a chance. But as silly and as ugly as this thing can be, there is no price on this. Typically, people are cobbling these things together out of junkyards and just making them work. So, um, if you're running this as a game and you want to give it to someone, maybe it's you trade it in for something insignificant. Maybe it's something that someone cobbled together in a hope and a prayer. Maybe you even sit there and say you can see that there's obviously some chewing gum, duct tape, and baler twine holding some of the parts together. However you want to do it, whatever makes the the atmosphere kind of exciting. Does it stay together? Does it fall apart? Kind of deal. Um, Obviously, with a hull of 2D, somebody's got some welding technique and they know how to keep this together, but it is not really a very ideal ship in the long run. It is an interesting thing to throw out there for cannon fodder to say, here's what the pirates are using today. So, um, kind of a short little view at this. Hopefully, it is a exciting view because it is something that we don't typically see in a lot of the mainstay of all the different ships and the lore and all that stuff. But these are some of the things that have been added into the galaxy um, to add extra flavor, extra, like I said, cannon fodder for different groups or whatever. You know, down on their luck, pirate organization might be grabbing something like this and using it and going from there. So, with that, that's all we have today. Hope you enjoy these. I'm enjoying doing these for you. And we'll see you in the next video.